This is the Law Matters. Of course it does. Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. This program has been designed to educate and inform and help you with law matters because the law matters. Understand the law better, and you're in a better position to protect yourself, your family, and your business. We provide information and resources that will help you decide whether or not you might want to handle some matters yourself. If you do decide to contact outside professional counsel, you'll be better prepared, and then so will they. Of course, the goal is to have an opportunity to save time, money, and achieve better results. We welcome and thank, as always, the Bazar Grasso law firm in East Providence, who continue to share their insights and perspectives and facts on the various issues that we tackle. And once again, we want to welcome Jackie Grasso and David Bazar, our counselors. So, learning life lessons. It's certainly one of the goals of college, but of all youth. They all need to learn certain life experiences. We're going to try to help you, and perhaps help your younger children, to avoid learning consequences, what they call the hard way. Sometimes, as those bad behaviors are tried out, and young people do have the right to make mistakes, sometimes the consequences can be upsetting, sometimes downright devastating. I think, recalling youth, I think most people would also agree that they've had occasions to think that they knew everything or had experienced everything, and of course they don't. Even if you were to take a single law course, that doesn't prepare you or equip you with the innate knowledge to tackle how the law might clash with your lifestyle. So if college is supposed to be the best 4-year vacation of someone's life, let's hope we get through without having too much trouble. So there are so many topics to tackle. We'll see how many we can get through. In those different behaviors, there's protest, there's the time-honored tradition of drinking. There's problems with parking tickets, protests, problems with credit card debt, hazing, so many. Let's get to it. So, Jackie, David, let's go with the time-honored tradition of drinking. Some campuses are wet, some are dry, but let's say for the sake of the ones that are wet, where you can drink if you're allowed to, of age, what happens when you're underage, underclassmen presumably? Is it any different if you were on a college campus or on the street and are caught DUI or in possession? What happens?
Well, DUI statutes, especially in Rhode Island and Mass, probably most states say you have to be caught on a public way, so it has to be a public street.
Okay.
If you're caught on a college campus, probably you'd be subject to discipline through whatever the college code of conduct is. But my knowledge is if it's a private location, it can't be charged by the police. It has to be in a public way.
Well, it depends on the situation. I mean, if the police are allowed on the property, they might be able to charge you as opposed to a private driveway or a private place. So if it's a big city school and you're driving through and you see city policemen there, then that might be different. But if it's totally walled off and you only have campus security and no city policemen or state police driving through, that's a different situation. But the consequences can be just as bad or worse in terms of whatever the school's policies are. And we've handled discipline actions at schools, and they do have some due process procedures and rights to be heard and counsel to be present. But an expulsion from college can be a devastating consequence no matter what the situation is.
And it's going to follow you wherever you go. Yeah. So if you're going to apply to another college, they're obviously going to want to know why you left the previous college.
And if you're underage, does that stay on your record, say, when you go for your first job interview, will it? Or if you're underage, is that not an issue?
It depends what the situation is and what the issue is. An expulsion on your college record's going to be there.
Yes.
That doesn't disappear.
Yes.
If you're charged with some violation as a minor, you won't have that on your record. But underage doesn't necessarily mean minor. Because you're 18, you're an adult. So you're charged as an adult, even though you're under 21, so it's probably going to be on your adult record until it's expunged.
And keep in mind, in Massachusetts, if you're charged at the age of 17, you're automatically charged as an adult.
Good to know.
People don't know that.
Good to know.
With any crime, you're charged at 17, you're charged as an adult if you're 17.
Is there likely to be a difference between the, as you pointed out, a public or a city college versus a closed-in private college? Are you less likely to have those kinds of expulsions or those kinds of consequences, or is it?
The consequences of the school rules will probably be the same.
Okay.
Actually, a state college may have more duty to follow certain fundamental rights and things of that nature more closely than a private college may be held to. It might be a different standard, but probably not, because if a private college takes federal funding or any type of money from the government, then they follow all the rules too.
And what about if they're not DUI, driving under the influence? What about if they are just in possession and they're underage, whether it's a wet or a dry campus? Consequences?
Always
of
consequences, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, different schools probably have different enforcement policies and different rules. If it's a dry campus and you violate the rules, then from the very beginning that school probably has every school probably has a student handbook and rules that are laid out for the students. So if you're at the school, you should know what the rules are and what the consequences are, sort of like being on notice before you violate something, what the risks is. But I would assume that if a school is dry, then they probably have stricter enforcement than a school that allows liquor on campus for students.
You mentioned earlier, David, that you've had an occasion to represent somebody who was in maybe this kind of fix. If a college student is in such a fix, do they actually need a lawyer, or can they work that out with the parents and go to see the dean or of women or students, or however that works? Well,
this particular situation, the student had been through 3 or 4 years of school, and I think it was a 5-year program. And they told him at the first level of hearing that he was going to be expelled. So given the nature of the violation, it was a very harsh conclusion. So there's an appeal process that he was entitled to. So now he has a hearing in front of a board, and already knowing what the school's bent is on his situation, and he had been charged with an off-campus crime, a violation, and that was actually dismissed. So when I went to the hearing, I said that you don't have a right to expel somebody on just the allegation of a criminal behavior that the state felt they couldn't prove and dismissed. So based on that, we were able to reverse the decision. But without me being there and being able to argue the legalities of the charges and his rights, he probably wouldn't have known what to say and how to do it and how to present it, and might not have gotten the same result.
Interesting. Now, when there are college police, chances are they are real police, or they might be just the college security. Do you get off easier?
Depends on the college. At URI, I think now the police are able to
carry guns.
Allowed to carry guns. It depends on the state college, especially. It depends. If it's a private college, then they have campus police. They're not allowed to carry guns unless by some freak of nature, maybe they pass some kind of legislation to allow them to do that.
But the answer is, do they have enforcement rights? What they usually do, as far as I've seen, is call the city police in. So, for example, when I was in college, I was in a co-ed dorm, co-ed by floor. I was on the first floor, the women were on the second floor, and it was a Saturday in November, and it had snowed that weekend, and people were out sledding on trays that they borrowed from the cafeteria. They were traying. And we heard a girl scream. So this other guy was sitting in my room with me, and I ran up the stairs, and we saw a girl in a towel, and she said that somebody had come into the shower, into the bathroom, and threatened her. And she screamed, he ran, so we chased after him. And when we came out the door, there were people walking all over the place with their trays and whatever, and we yelled, did you see anyone come out? And they pointed at a guy who was crossing the street. So we chased him, and 2 other guys chased him, and we captured him. We dragged him back to the dorm, and the security police were already there, the campus security, campus police, and they said, don't let him go. Well, obviously, we chased him down. We weren't going to let him go. And we held him until the Hartford police arrived. So the campus police, if they aren't the city gendarmes, they're allowed to detain you until they call the local authorities or whatever. And are they able to handcuff a
person?
I think they can, because I think they have handcuffs,
Yeah.
as I recall.
I know they're talking, as you pointed out, Jackie, some of them are able to tote guns these days, and
Yeah.
of course many campuses are debating that these
Right.
days. So while we're on the subject of things that might be legal and college kids overindulge in at times, how about the pot smoking? Even in states where it's legal, if you are DUI, driving under the influence, you're stoned. If you're stoned on campus, is it different from if you are stoned driving on a street?
I
You
don't.
still have the public-private
Right,
way. I guess
yeah.
it matters on whether it's a public or private college.
Yeah.
If you're committing a crime, you're committing a crime. But you have to go even further. Suppose it's a 20-year-old who has a medicinal marijuana card. You know, shouldn't be driving under the influence, but, you know, I can foresee someone stopping this person and the strong odor of marijuana protruding
Certainly.
from, yeah,
Right.
so, you know.
It's going to be interesting, and this hasn't really limited to college campuses in and of itself, but if Rhode Island, for example, legalizes marijuana and someone's driving under the influence of marijuana, unlike alcohol, as far as I understand it, when you take a breathalyzer, there's a reading, so you can be judged to have a certain amount of alcohol in your system, and that's prima facie evidence that you're driving under the influence. They don't have the same kind of ability, at least I don't think they do it, to measure how much marijuana is in your system.
They would just have the field sobriety test.
Right. So what's going to happen is, back in the day when I started, all of the DUI cases were basically observation cases. So they're going to have to be observation cases for marijuana for police to charge somebody to say that they're under the influence of it. So it'll be interesting to see how that's going to be enforced when and if that ever happens. And so in college, you know, same thing. You have marijuana in your dorm room. Is that okay? Well, no, because if it's a state where you're not allowed to possess it, it's still a violation of the law.
Let's continue on that for a second, but I want to get back. Oh, actually, let me just go back to what Jackie was saying earlier. You mentioned field sobriety. Clarify, is that walk the line?
That's exactly. Walk the line, you know, finger to nose, what is it, the gaze?
The horizontal gaze test.
Yeah, that.
Okay.
So,
Nystagmus.
yeah.
Yep.
Stand on one leg.
Those
So
are
as
things.
David said, it's observation. It's also subjective on part of a police officer, whether he or she thinks the person has or hasn't passed the field sobriety test.
Which
Okay.
is part of what makes those difficult cases.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have no measurement. There's no physical measurement as you would have with a breathalyzer. So
Are college campuses likely to call the outside cops and make it more of an issue, or a college campus is more likely to keep it under their auspices? Are they able to do that?
I don't think you can generalize on that. I think it's
Do you need to be wary?
Yeah, I mean, I think you would have to act as if you were anywhere else in the world. So if you're going to violate the law on college campuses, you're going to not only have the law of the land to deal with, but probably the rules of the college. So it's actually probably even more so an issue on a college campus than off the college campus. And it depends how the college wants to enforce its rules.
Would they need to call in a lawyer? Should a parent call in a lawyer if their child is on campus and they're caught in possession or something?
Depends on what charges are brought and
Okay.
how the school
That's
or
the
the
issue.
police are dealing with it.
Police usually will knock before entering. Does that rule have to be followed on a college dorm campus, or if they think that they hear something that sounds like there's lots of drinking going on or there's lots of stoning going on, can they just walk in? Do kids have rights? What do they do?
they have rights to privacy.
Yeah.
Knock and enter.
I think
It depends on the college too.
Well, I think
can
there's
they
an-
enforce that in a policy?
I think there's an expectation of privacy,
yeah.
but on the other hand, they are theoretically security, not policemen, so do they have the
Theoretically.
same rules? Well, I'll give you an example. Again, back when I was in college, I had a friend who was out with his other buddies, and they were making a lot of noise, having a party, drinking, and the campus security came by and said, all right, guys, you have to tone it down. You're making too much noise. So they did for a little while, and then they started making noise again, and the campus police came back and they saw them coming, so they all scattered to their different dorm rooms, and there's a knock at the door, and they made believe they were sleeping, and so he opened the door, this campus security, and he's got the flashlight on, and they shines in their eyes like they just woke up, and then he shines it on what I think might have been a purloined stop sign from one of the stop signs on campus that was on the wall. He said, "What's that stop sign doing on the wall?" And the friend said, "So I don't drive through the wall, of course." So, but he just opened the door. Now, whether or not, if he found something illegal, that could have been used in a prosecution by the city or town, is a different situation, because did he have the right to open the door? Maybe. And then what he saw in plain sight? Maybe. And now the city or police are coming in and taking advantage of the fact that he was able to search without a warrant. I think you could argue against his ability to do that, because you could say he's an agent or arm of the police. So it's an open question, but I do know that campus police oftentimes will just open a door.
So Jackie, do you think if that's the case, do those campus police, and I guess we want to tell the parents if this is true, do you want to caution your children that a policeman, the campus police have to Mirandize them, and they should keep their mouths shut and not answer a question, or should they? How should they handle it?
Well, I think if they're faced with a crime, and then they should be, constitutionally, they have to be Mirandized, regardless of who's arresting them,
right.
Campus or public.
And of course, what we would prefer is that our children be on the other side of all of that, and that the campus police are there to help and protect them.
Yes.
And that's really where you want to be.
Yes, and yet, of late, for the number of times that the campus security, the campus police, or the campus in general was going to take care of the issue, the big issue that I don't think we have time to discuss today about alleged sexual abuse, which you were almost beginning to allude to, that has been considered to be one of the taboos of college campuses now, holding it or containing it under the campus auspices and not going to the police. And of course, that's been a very big problem. We should probably save that for another day. But certainly there's, I think it's important that you have an occasion to tell people what their children should do, or if the children are listening.
If you have a child that's faced with that unfortunate situation, who's a victim, I would say take it beyond the campus police and go to the local authorities.
Right.
And forget, you can't always depend on
And I know there are studies and reports and all of these things that different schools have different rates of reporting and protecting students against sexual abuse and that type of thing. But you always have the right as a victim, if something happens to you, to go straight to the local police and report the crime.
And apparently that's what's advised now, because too many have tried to keep a lid on it. So on a somewhat lighter note, other behaviors that young people exercise, whether it's on a college campus or just in general, the right to free speech and the right to protest. So on a college campus, do you really have complete right to free speech on a public or a private campus, or can there be serious consequences to whatever your supposedly free speech is about?
Well, I think most schools would encourage that type of behavior, because they want an engaged student body, but they also want it done politely and respectfully. So do you have the right to protest on a campus? I'm sure you do. But I know at Brown University there's been incidents where there's been speakers there and interruptions and things like that, and I'm sure at other schools. And I'm sure it's a school policy that if you do something like that, you are now violating school rules, because you're interfering with other people's ability to have free speech and make a stance on some politics or whatever it is that they want to talk about. And so while you have a right to protest and you have a right to be heard, I think schools require this to be done in a respectful manner.
Do you think that parents should be having a discussion with their children before whether they go to college or living out on their own in the world for the first time, even though theoretically you should have the right of free speech? You might want to watch what you say and where you say it and how you say it. Is that a worthwhile discussion?
The issue is it could follow you later on in life. I mean, there are people that have protested in their younger years of life. I can think of a judge who protested in her younger years of life, and when she was becoming a judge, there was a certain picture that came up that came out of the woodwork. So how many years later was it? 20, 30, 40 years later, it could follow you no matter where you go. And in politics today, they can find out something about you when you were 7 years old.
And
things follow you.
They'll use anything they can if you're an opponent of somebody going through that process. So you always want your children to use common sense. I think telling your child, the rules of life as they're growing up and when they go off, what they're going to listen to really is a whole other story.
So how about, not on a college campus, but just in general, young people for decades, and probably many more to follow, they have the right to protest. Occupy has been one of the big issues, but there are other things that people protest about. Are there words of caution? What can happen to them that you might want to make them aware of so that they don't end up in trouble, in courts, in jail, or whatever? You want to protest. You don't like something that's being done or said. What do you advise someone to be wary of?
Well, you wouldn't want them to destroy property because they'll be charged with vandalism. Again,
do it sensibly.
Yeah, common sense, exactly what I was going to say. You want them to follow common sense. So what did they used to do in Vietnam era days? Sit-ins and take over offices and do that kind of stuff. I suppose that type of behavior is disruptive, but not something that's probably going to subject you to arrest.
But that's a good point. Suppose someone takes issue with it, and I think disrupting could be something that just about anybody could claim at any time. If that gives someone grounds to haul your body off into...
If they're disrupting and police warn you or the college campus warns you, you have to leave because you're being disruptive and you continue to do that, then I would assume that then they do have a right to arrest.
Right.
And even off campus, even in a local city square where you see it, I've seen it in other countries too, where some
it's
arrest,
the same
some
rules
don't.
of anybody else as what are the rules of gathering and protest, and that's protected. It's a constitutionally protected right as long as it's done in a responsible manner following the local rules and ordinances.
Well, look what happened on Route 95, was it last year?
Very good
where
point.
Those people decided to protest, and they pretty much, they were on the highway. They stopped the traffic. Subject to arrest there. You're not supposed to go on a public highway and just stop traffic, protest. So that wasn't a smart thing to do. They could have been killed.
That's another story, true, of course. How about just plainly trespassing, because sometimes wherever they're going to set up their camp or stake or picket signs or whatever they're doing, very likely they're going to be trespassing. How serious an offense is that? One worth considering or no?
It depends where, how, and what's being done. So go back. Do you remember in Providence when they were setting up camps in the park area downtown?
Providence?
Occupy Providence.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted them moved. They went to court to get them moved. But I don't think it resulted in arrests or convictions, at least, of anybody. There may have been some arrests, but I don't think there were any convictions based on that. And so it's a large group of people doing a public protest in a manner that is probably disruptive, but again, I believe, I could be wrong about this, but when the court order came down that they had to vacate, I think they vacated.
Interesting to know. So we might want to just caution our kids. I don't imagine many young people are going to be thinking about applying to the city ordinances to see if they can get a waiver before they decide to squat down. But anyway, we might want to warn them a little bit. So, Jackie, on countless occasions we've talked about credit issues. Young people, college people, often have their first experience with getting credit, may not use it so well. Do they have the same kind of repercussions the average adult does, who might need to either declare bankruptcy and they get to keep a house, but young people don't have that as an issue? What are the problems or the precautions that you could give us for young people who are starting to get in over their heads and not handling credit cards and debt well?
Well, if a credit card company gives a 17-year-old, sometimes you get 17-year-olds that go to college, a credit card, then, shame on them. But 99% of the kids are 18. It's not that easy to get a credit card nowadays. Usually if it's an 18-year-old or any, 18, 19, 20, if the individual's never had credit, they're going to require a cosigner. If they require a cosigner, whether the original borrower pays and the cosigner pays, it doesn't really matter. If either of them default, the same consequences. It's going to impact your credit. It's going to follow you for several years. If bankruptcy is a result, then it's going to be the same thing, you know. But they could be subject to bankruptcy. They could be subject to collection activity from collection agencies. It's going to follow you.
So I remember back in the day, credit card companies were on campus when freshmen were moving
setting
in.
up at
recruiting.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Do they still do that, do you think?
I don't know if that happens. I haven't been to college in a long time. Maybe you have.
I have, actually.
Yeah.
So what do we say to young people who are starting out with wanting a credit card? Because most of them can maybe get a debit card attached to their bank account or whatever, but if they're going to...
That's a little different, though, because the money's coming right out of an existing bank account that has money. I mean, that's funded.
That's funded.
Yeah.
But if it's a credit card, do young people have the same kind of lasting consequences of 7 years or whatever it is that an adult would?
Absolutely.
So they have to be aware of that, too.
Yes,
an adult is still an adult, whether you're 18 or 88.
Point well taken. Good to know, parents or young people. Young people sometimes live on college campuses in dorms. Sometimes they rent apartments. Even if you're not in college, you're a young person, you're taking your first apartment. Do we need to have a lawyer look at that rental agreement to make sure that there isn't trouble?
Not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Rather
and
than
most landlords want a guarantee by a
yeah.
parent. They don't want, you know, just the student signing the lease. They want a guarantee by a parent.
Young people who live near a college campus or young people who are just wanting to share expenses, is it legal, is it right, or even worthwhile for the landlord to say, I want the 5 people who are going to be living in that house to each have separate contracts with me?
They do that.
Is that legal?
Yes,
is that
they
fair?
all do that.
Or sign, all co-sign the same one.
Yeah.
All co-sign the same
One
one.
lease,
Okay,
yeah.
not
Same
the
lease.
parent co-sign. You're saying
Well,
all
no,
the
No,
others.
parents too.
Each student would sign, and perhaps parent guarantors.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Young people often in their wisdom like to haze when it comes to college fraternities and whatnot, and pranks. Sounds like it could be innocent. Suppose it's not innocent and there's a bad outcome. Underage, 18, 17, less of a consequence? Are there troubles? What do we need to bring in a criminal lawyer if something bad happens? Is it just forgotten? What
I suppose
happens?
depends on the situation. There can be criminal consequences. Isn't there a case now pending where there was some issue as to whether or not the hazing rose to the level of criminal activity?
Yeah.
And there could be civil cases as a result
That was in a high school, though, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Private school. Someone was being prosecuted.
Yeah. I couldn't remember the details, but
With
yeah.
a girl. With some...
Oh, no, that was the case up in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Which was an alleged sexual assault.
Yeah.
And that trial was just recently concluded. I didn't follow it, but yeah.
So beware with what those consequences could possibly... Most kids don't think that anything terrible is going to happen. Well, we certainly have covered quite a few topics. We hope that it's been helpful to you. We thank you for tuning in to The Law Matters, and we hope you'll be with us next time because the law matters to you. Thank you.